My wife was 37 weeks pregnant, bleeding through the towel I was holding and screaming in pain, and the president of our HOA slammed the emergency gate shut in my face. 11 minutes. That's how long she blocked us from reaching the ER that was less than 500 feet away. Later that night, while my wife lay hooked to IVs fighting to hold on to our daughter, I opened my front door to find a violation notice for $4,500 shoved through my mail slot. That's when I realized this wasn't just personal, it was systemic, and it was going to keep happening unless I made it stop. My name is Lucas Marin. I used to be a trauma medic. Now I coordinate emergency preparedness for a hospital. I spend my days making sure people don't die waiting on red tape, so the irony wasn't lost on me when the red tape turned out to be a smug woman in yoga pants holding a clipboard and power she should never have had. We moved to Lakeside Glen Estates because of its proximity to the hospital. Maya. My wife had complicated pregnancies before, and I promised her this time would be different. We'd be safe here. And for a while it felt like we were. Perfect lawns, quiet streets, hedges trimmed into identical squares, it looked like security. Turns out it was a stage set for something rotten underneath. That night when Maya started bleeding, I didn't think I just drove. The ER gate was the fastest route. But there was Colleen Durrett, president of the HOA board SUV, parked sideways across the access lane. I jumped out shouting that my wife was hemorrhaging, that every second mattered. She leaned against the post like she owned the air, pressed the override, and locked the gate. She smiled. Actually smiled. "Rules are rules," she said. "Maybe next time leave earlier." My wife was gasping beside me, nails digging into the dashboard. The fetal monitor on her phone blared. And all I could do was hit the steering wheel, because if I rammed that gate, we'd be fighting felony charges and lawsuits on top of the medical emergency. When a nurse finally saw us and opened the gate manually, 11 minutes had passed. The doctor later told me that if we'd been any later, Maya could have suffered a complete abruption. Our daughter's heart rate had already dipped twice. Colleen wasn't in the operating room when they cut my wife open. She wasn't there when I watched the monitor flatline and begged it not to. But she sure as hell was quick to mail me a violation notice, $4,500 improper use of emergency access. Sitting in my living room that night, watching Maya sleep with a butterfly IV still in her wrist, I stared at that letter until my vision blurred. That's when the fury set in. Because I knew this wasn't just about me, it was about anyone who dared cross the unwritten rule of this neighborhood. Colleen decides, and everyone else stays quiet. The silence started immediately. Neighbors who used to wave now looked right through me. The community newsletter skipped any mention of the emergency. Then came the petty complaints, a suspicious package filed against my Amazon delivery, an anonymous note about my recycling bin placement. Breadcrumbs leading to one outcome: isolation, and the fines kept climbing. $9,000 this time because I hadn't apologized or attended their little behavior review meeting where I was supposed to sit across from the woman who almost killed my wife and explain why I hadn't followed proper procedure. I laughed when I first read it, but Maya didn't. She just folded and refolded the baby's swaddles in silence, her way of coping with panic. And I'll be honest, there was a night I almost gave up. I sat on the porch, staring at Colleen's perfect porch light glowing across the street, one of her own rules that every home must keep their lights on from dusk till dawn. I thought maybe we should just pay the fine, swallow it, keep our heads down. Was I wrong to fight? Was I endangering my wife and daughter more by pushing back? Maybe the system was too big, too rigged. I actually asked myself if maybe Colleen was right, if I'd overreacted. And that thought burned more than anything else. Then came the first crack in her wall. Mark Tilden, the HOA secretary, emailed me. Just a single line: "I can't talk on email. Not safe. But I'm not okay with what she did." A few days later, in the grocery store parking lot, he stopped without turning around and whispered, "I saw the footage before it was erased." He handed me a sticky note with a time code from the HOA server logs, proof that someone had manually shut off the recording right after the gate was locked. Proof she was covering her tracks. That note snapped me out of my spiral. Then there was Ruth Delgado, an older neighbor who'd lived there longer than anyone. She handed me a wrinkled envelope with her statement from years ago, an EMT blocked during a seizure call because Colleen claimed the gate was malfunctioning. The patient ended up in ICU, and she hadn't stopped there. Ruth had an entire notebook, 3 years of entries: kids injured, ambulances delayed, a diabetic woman forced to wait while her husband drove through landscaping. Colleen wasn't enforcing rules, she was bending them to feed her need for control. I scanned everything, filed it with the hospital's legal department, and called an old contact at the county's Emergency Infrastructure Board, Derek Maynard. I laid it out: plain metadata logs, witness statements, a pattern of obstruction. He didn't hesitate. If it's what you say it is, this won't end with a slap on the wrist. That's when I knew the tide was shifting. Of course, Colleen fought back. She called an emergency board meeting, tried to push through a motion giving herself unilateral override authority on all emergency infrastructure. Total control. Mark tipped me off and then showed up at my door with a backpack. Inside was a hard drive, a mirrored backup of the HOA server logs. It had everything: override signals, deleted footage records, even emails proving she'd escalated my fines without quorum. Illegal from top to bottom. Mark looked exhausted, guilty, but resolute. If I don't do this now, he said, I'll never be able to look at myself again. I stayed up all night drafting a 37-page report. I wrote it like a hazard assessment because that's what it was. Each incident laid out with timestamps, witness corroboration, medical records from Maya's transport. 11 minutes blocked at the gate. Our baby's heart decelerating. I ended with Colleen's pending vote for unilateral authority, proof she was escalating her abuse in real time. At dawn, I hit send. When the inspectors arrived, it wasn't subtle. County seal on the car, hard-sided case in Derek's hands. Enforcement authority. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was an intervention. They examined the gate, the override unit still pinging hospital relays, the logs Mark handed over. The evidence lined up too clean to ignore Colleen's IP address, manual deletions, forged votes. The inspectors issued a cease and desist on the spot. Control of the gate reverted to the county, and a mandatory community hearing was scheduled under county directive. The meeting was unlike anything this neighborhood had ever seen. Standing room only, people pressed against the walls, the county seal projected on the screen. Colleen stood near the podium, clipboard clutched like a shield, her jaw locked tight. One by one, neighbors spoke. Sandra, a nurse, told of her emergency calls, delayed patients losing consciousness. Ruth finally shared her 3-year notebook of obstructions. People who had been silent for years found their voices. When it was my turn, I didn't bring the thick report. I brought a single photo. The gate locked. Maya slumped in the passenger seat, hand on her stomach, my hand gripping the wheel. Timestamp 11:48 p.m. This is what she locked out, I said. I didn't need to raise my voice. The silence in the room was enough. The county inspector didn't waste words. Based on the findings and testimony, we are recommending the immediate suspension of HOA President Colleen Durrett. The words landed like a gavel. Neighbors shifted forward in their chairs, whispers spreading, then applause, scattered at first, then swelling. Colleen tried to speak, called it a witch hunt, but the inspector cut her off. This is no longer your forum. She froze when she saw Mark standing behind the inspector, binder in hand. He handed over the audit trail of vote discrepancies and override logs. That was it. Her grip was gone. Colleen left the meeting in silence. No dramatic exit speech, no plea for sympathy. Just a slammed SUV door and taillights fading down the street. She was suspended, stripped of authority, and within a week her house had a for sale sign out front. The gate she locked on us was ripped out and replaced with a county-controlled system, no HOA overrides allowed. I can't tell you I felt joy. What I felt was clarity. Colleen wasn't untouchable anymore. And for the first time in months, the silence that had blanketed our neighborhood cracked wide open. Power unchecked is just tyranny with better landscaping.